The sky above the barren planet split with fire as two escape pods tore through the atmosphere like falling stars. One was human, the other alien, both tumbling end over end, metal screaming against the heat of entry. Inside one, Captain Alara. Voss gripped her seat strap so hard her knuckles turned white, her eyes locked on the glowing display that showed her descent. Warnings flashed across the console shield: failure, oxygen leak, heat rising. She tasted blood in her mouth, where she had bitten her lip, but she didn't let go. Her ship was gone, destroyed in an ambush, and this pod was her only chance. When the pod slammed into the planet, the world outside erupted in dust and fire. The shock rattled her bones, slammed her forward against the straps, and then silence. Followed heavy, crushing silence, broken only by her ragged breathing. Ilara forced the hatch open, and the stale hot air of the planet hit her lungs. She staggered out, boots sinking slightly in dry, red sand. Around her stretched endless plains of rock and dust, a world stripped of life. The sky was a dark copper color, storms boiling in the distance, lightning tearing across low clouds. She knew at once this world was dead. No trees, no rivers, not even the cry of a bird. It was the kind of planet you survived on for days, maybe weeks, but never for long. Her pod was cracked, burning, and the supplies inside were barely enough. For one, as she pulled a small pack free, her eyes caught movement far across the plain. Another pod had crashed, torn in half by impact, smoke trailing from it at first. She thought it might be one of her own crew, some lost pilot who had managed to escape. Her heart gave a flicker of hope, but as she raised the scope from her pack and peered across the dust, her blood ran cold. The figure crawling out of that broken pod was tall, broad-shouldered, with armor plates glinting in the red light. His skin shimmered with a faint metallic hue, and his movements were sharp, deliberate. He was not human. He was one of them, the enemy. For a moment, fear and rage clashed inside her. Her people had fought his kind for years, and she had seen. The bodies left behind on battlefields, friends torn apart, colonies burned to ash. Her first instinct was to pull the pistol from her pack and end it before he even noticed her. But she didn't fire. Something stopped her, the simple truth that she was alone, and so was he. On this dead world, the air thinning, storms rolling, closer, no one could survive alone for long. She crouched behind the wreckage, watching him drag himself free. His leg was bleeding, a dark green liquid dripping into the sand. He leaned against his pod, chest heaving, his weapon clutched tight. In one hand, even injured, he looked dangerous, a predator ready to strike. His eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and burning, until they locked on her. They stayed there, unblinking, as if he had known all along she was watching. For a long moment, neither moved. The storm winds picked up, dust swirling between them. It would have been so easy to lift her pistol, squeeze the trigger, and let this enemy die on the rocks. But deep down, Alara knew the truth. She killed him, she might be sealing her own fate. Two survivors stood a better chance than one, even if it meant working beside a sworn enemy. Her hand shook slightly as she lowered the weapon. She saw him hesitate as well, his blade gleaming faintly in his hand, but he did not advance. He only watched her with those sharp alien eyes, measuring, waiting. Ilara broke the silence first, her voice raw from smoke. "We can fight, or we can live, your choice." The alien tilted his head, as if tasting the words. "Da-da-da." His voice came back deep, metallic, rough with pain. "For now." The storm roared louder, lightning crashing against the cliffs in the distance, and Alara felt the ground tremble faintly beneath her boots, looked up at the sky, red clouds tearing apart under the violence of the weather, and knew this world held more dangers than either of them could yet see. If they stayed apart, both would die. If they came together, maybe, just maybe, they could survive. With slow, careful steps, she approached him. Neither put away their weapons, neither dared turn their back. But for the first time since the crash, Lara felt something other than fear. She felt the spark of a fragile, dangerous alliance. And in her gut, she knew one thing with sharp certainty. Whatever this planet was, it was not empty. Something slept beneath its surface. Something that had already begun to stir the moment their pods fell from the sky. The storm raged across the lifeless plain, tearing dust into the air until the world turned into a blur of red and shadow. Alara pulled the collar of her suit higher, shielding her mouth and nose as grit stung her face. The alien moved beside her, his tall frame cutting through the dust as though he had walked such storms before. They had said nothing since their first exchange, just a glance. Just the faintest nod. Now they trudged side by side, toward a small outcropping of rocks that promised shelter. The silence between them was thick with danger. Alara's hand hovered close to her pistol with every step. She didn't trust him, she couldn't. His kind had killed humans without mercy, and his eyes still burned with that same war-born fire. Yet there was something different too. He didn't strike, didn't lunge, didn't try to finish what the war had begun. He limped heavily, his bleeding legs slowing him down. And Alara found herself glancing at him more than once, wondering how long he could last without treatment. She hated herself for it, but some part of her knew, if he collapsed, her own chances of survival would sink with him. When they reached the rocks, the storm howled louder, lightning cracking against the horizon. They ducked into a shallow cave, just as the sky split with fire. Inside, the air was cooler, though it carried the bitter smell of dust. Alara dropped her pack and began sorting through the few supplies she had, half a ration pack. 1 water filter, 2 med stims, and a short beam lantern. It wasn't enough. Not for 1 human, certainly not for 2. The alien lowered himself. Against the stone wall, his hand pressed tight over the wound on his leg. Green blood seeped between his fingers. He finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "Dame." Alara looked up sharply. "What?" "Your name," he repeated, slower this time, as though shaping human words felt strange on his tongue. She hesitated. Sharing names with an enemy felt wrong, dangerous. Yet his sharp eyes waited, patient. "Alara," she said. "Last, Captain Alara Voss." He inclined his head slightly. "Rykon." The word hung in the air, foreign, heavy. Lara studied him in the dim light, the hard lines of his face, the faint shimmer of his skin, the strange symbols etched into his broken armor. She didn't know if Rykon was his real name or just a sound he offered. But it was more than she expected. "You'll bleed out if you don't let me look at that wound," she said finally. Rykon's lips curled faintly, almost like a smirk. "You care?" "I don't," she snapped. "But dragging your corpse across this planet doesn't sound like survival." For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then slowly he moved his hand aside. The wound was deep, torn open by shrapnel, the green blood still leaking steadily. Alara grimaced but forced herself to lean closer. She cleaned it with the last of her sterile gel and pressed a sealant patch over it, her hands steady though her heart raced. Rykon never flinched, never looked away, but when she finished, he gave a small nod. "Debt," I said simply. "I don't want your debt," Alara muttered, shoving her supplies back into her pack. But in her chest, something shifted. She had expected him to spit hatred, to lash out, to sneer that her help meant nothing. Instead, he acknowledged it calm, simple, unshaken. She wasn't sure what to make of that. The storm outside hammered the rocks for hours. They sat in silence, listening to the distant thunder roll. Finally, Alara pulled out the short beam lantern and set it between them, its faint glow cutting the dark. Rykon's eyes reflected the light like molten gold, never blinking, always watching. "You think this world is dead?" he said suddenly. "It is," she replied. "No water, no plants, no sign of life, just dust and storms." Shook his head slowly. "Not dead. Sleeping." A chill ran down her spine at the way he said it. "What do you mean?" Rykon leaned his head back against the stone, his voice low. "Our ship scanned this world once, long ago. Energy beneath the surface, old structures, buried deep." His eyes locked on hers. "This world is not empty. It remembers." Alara's stomach tightened. She wanted to dismiss it as superstition, a trick of an alien trying to scare her. But something about the way the storm had shaken the ground, The way the air hummed faintly when lightning struck made her wonder. She remembered the feeling she had when her pod landed, that sense that something had stirred awake. Before she could reply, a sound echoed faintly from outside the cave. It wasn't thunder. It was deeper, more hollow, like stone cracking far beneath the ground. Both of them froze. Riken's hand closed around the hilt of his blade. Lara's fingers brushed the grip of her pistol. The noise came again, closer. This time, the ground beneath them gave a subtle tremor. Dust shook loose from the cave ceiling. Lara's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt her throat go dry. Whatever this world was hiding, it was waking up. The night stretched long and restless. Alara sat near the cave's mouth, her pistol resting on her thigh, her eyes scanning the storm-choked horizon. Rykon had fallen into a strange half-sleep, his breathing steady, but his hand never far from the curved blade at his side. Even in exhaustion, he radiated danger. Alara kept her guard up, though a part of her wondered if he was doing the same, waiting for her to strike, while he pretended to rest. The storm finally broke near dawn, leaving. The land painted in strange colors of ash and pale light. The silence that followed was worse than the thunder. The air was too still, too heavy, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Alara stood and stretched her aching limbs, every muscle stiff from tension. When she glanced back, Riken was already awake, watching her with those golden eyes. "We move," he said, his voice low and certain. "To where?" she asked bitterly. "We're stranded on a rock with nothing but dust and broken air." Riken rose slowly, limping but strong enough to carry his weight. "The ground spoke last night. This world hides something. Shelter. Power. Maybe even a way to call the skies." Alara narrowed her eyes. "Or maybe it hides death." He tilted. His head, a faint shadow of a smile flickering across his face. "Same thing." They left the cave as the sun clawed its way up. The plain stretched in every direction, empty yet unsettling. Their footsteps echoed too loudly. Dust shifted in the breeze, leaving trails that vanished too quickly, as though swallowed by unseen hands. Alara's instincts screamed that they weren't alone. Hours passed as they crossed the wasteland, the hunger in her stomach gnawing stronger with every step. Riken said little, though his sharp gaze scanned the horizon with an intensity that reminded Alara of a predator stalking prey. She hated the uneasy trust forming between them, but survival forced it upon her. Without him, she'd already be dead, slain by the storm, or buried under shifting sands. By midday, they reached the edge of a vast scar in the ground. A canyon that stretched so deep its floor was lost to shadows. The walls glowed faintly, threads of blue light weaving through the stone-like veins. Alara stared in disbelief. "That's impossible, alive," Riken murmured. "The heart of the world? Waiting." Alara shook her head. "Some kind of mineral. Radiation, maybe?" But even as she said it, her voice wavered. The light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. She felt the vibration under her boots. Riken began descending the jagged slope without hesitation. Alara cursed under her breath but followed, unwilling to let him vanish into whatever secrets lay below. The deeper they climbed, the stronger the hum became, till the walls themselves seemed to sing in a low, trembling chorus. Halfway down, Alara froze. Symbols lined the canyon walls, carved deep into the stone, glowing with the same blue light. They weren't random marks. They were deliberate, shaped by intelligent hands. "Who built this?" she whispered. "Not your kind, not mine," Riken answered, his voice reverent, older. The symbols seemed to shift as she looked at them, bending and reshaping as if alive. Her head throbbed and she tore her gaze away, pressing a hand to her temple. "I don't like this," she muttered. "Good," Riken said, never slowing. "Fear keeps you alive." At last they reached a ledge where the canyon widened into a cavern mouth. The glow inside was brighter, spilling like liquid light across the stone floor. Alara felt the air thicken, heavy with energy that made her skin prickle. Riken stepped inside first, his blade drawn. Alara followed, her pistol steady. The cavern stretched vast and endless, its ceiling lost in shadow. At the center stood a monolithic structure, half buried, its surface black and smooth, etched with the same living symbols. The light pulsed from within it, a rhythm that seemed to sync with Elara's own heartbeat. Her breath caught at not natural. Raikon's gaze was fixed on it, his voice a whisper of awe. "It is a seed. A seed?" she asked sharply. "World makers," he said, his golden eyes reflecting the glow. "The ones who shaped stars, who planted life across the void. This is their memory." Elara's pulse thundered in her ears. She had heard legends, scraps of forgotten science that spoke of ancient architects who vanished long before humanity left Earth. But to see something like this, real, alive, was beyond belief. Before she could ask more, the ground shuddered. The monolith pulsed brighter, and a deep sound rolled through the cavern like a drumbeat. The dust around them lifted into the air as though pulled by invisible currents. Then slowly the black surface of the monolith cracked open, a narrow seam, split down the middle, spilling light so bright it cut the cavern in two. Elara staggered back, shielding her eyes. Rakan stood firm, his blade raised though his face showed no fear only reverence. The light swelled, humming louder, the canyon trembling as if the planet itself awakened from a long slumber. And in that blinding glow, Elara knew one thing with cold certainty. This world was never lifeless. It had been waiting. The light pouring from the monolith was blinding, a torrent of brilliance that turned the cavern into a glowing ocean. Elara shielded her eyes. But even through her hand she could see strange patterns forming in the air shapes like constellations. Stars that spun and shifted into lines of meaning her mind almost grasped. Almost. The moment she tried to hold on, the symbols dissolved, leaving behind a sharp ache in her skull. Rakan didn't flinch. He stood firm in the glow, his blade lowered now, his posture almost reverent. The golden hue of his eyes seemed to dance in rhythm with the pulsing light. Elara felt her stomach twist. He wasn't afraid, not even cautious. He was. Connected to it somehow, the seam widened with a low grinding sound, like stone tearing apart after centuries of silence. The cavern shook, dust raining down in fine streams. Then from the opening came a rush of cold air, heavy with a scent. That wasn't dust or stone, but something metallic and sweet like ozone after lightning. And then a voice, not spoken, not in sound, but inside Elara's mind. A whisper and a roar at once. Awakened. Finally awakened, her knees buckled. She staggered, dropping her pistol, clutching her temples as the voice thundered inside her skull. Flashes of images burned across her vision, vast structures hanging. In black space, stars collapsing into light, endless oceans filled with towers of fire. She gasped, choking for air, as though the vision itself was suffocating her. Rakan caught her shoulder before she fell, his grip steady, grounding her. "Breathe," he ordered, his voice a rare anchor in the storm of noise. She dragged in air, forcing her lungs to obey. When the chaos eased, she opened her eyes. The monolith was no longer just a block of black stone. The crack had widened in two. A doorway, and inside was something vast and shifting, a core of light and shadow swirling like liquid glass. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't alive in any way she understood. But it was. Rakan stepped closer, his face illuminated. "It remembers," he murmured. "The seed remembers what it was built to do." Elara found her voice thin and hoarse. "What the hell is it?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "A heart, a memory, a choice." The words chilled. Her more than the visions had. She looked again at the light. It pulsed in slow rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. For a moment, she felt as though it was syncing with her own, pulling her into its rhythm. A whisper curled in the edges of her thoughts. Not lifeless, waiting for the right touch, waiting for the bond. Her breath caught. "It's aware. Gone." Gave a slow nod. "And it has chosen us." She shook her head violently. "No, I didn't ask for this. I just went off this cursed rock." The ground trembled harder, as though the planet itself had heard her rejection and recoiled. Crack! Raced up the cavern wall, spilling more glowing lines across the stone, like veins bursting open. The air thickened, humming so loudly her bones vibrated. The light surged again. From within the heart, shapes began to form. Not solid, not flesh shadows, sculpted from light. Tall figures, towering and elegant, their forms shifting between. Alien and human, as if memory itself was shaping them. Ilara's breath froze. They were not here. Not really. They were echoes. Projections of something ancient and vast. One of the figures stepped forward, its body blazing brighter than the others. When it spoke, the cavern seemed to bow to its voice. The seed must bloom. The cycle must turn. Ilara stumbled back. No, I don't understand. The figure's gaze turned to her, though it had no eyes. The weight of it pressed against her chest. Heavy as gravity, you carry the spark. So does the other. One must awaken the world. One must become its voice. Her heart pounded wildly. What are you saying? But no answer came. The light flared, searing her eyes until she cried out. When she blinked away the haze, the figures were gone. Only the swirling core remained, glowing with a terrible patience. Riken's hand was still on his blade, though he hadn't raised it. His face was calm, but she saw the tension in his jaw. It speaks to you too, Ilara swallowed, her mouth dry. It wants one of us. Maybe both. I don't even know what it means. Raycon finally looked at her, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her shiver. It means this world is not dead. It means we are not alone. And it means the choice will break us or bind us. The cavern trembled again, and the light pulsed brighter, demanding an answer neither of them were ready to give. The cavern's glow seemed to seep into their skin, crawling under the surface, making every nerve hum with restless energy. Ilara felt it in her chest, in the back of her skull, in the trembling of her hands. She didn't want it, but it wanted her. And no matter how many steps back she took, the pull of the heart of the world dragged her forward like invisible chains. Raycon hadn't moved away. If anything, he was standing closer, his body rigid, as though the force inside the chamber was testing him, daring him to take a step into the light. His golden eyes shimmered with faint rings, glowing brighter than she had ever seen before. Ilara's voice cracked as she whispered, "Don't." He turned to her slowly, his face shadowed, half lit by the swirling radiance. You don't understand? This is what I was born for. This world called me the moment we crashed here. I thought it was madness. But no, this is destiny. Her pulse spiked. Destiny. You think it wants you? Didn't you hear it? It spoke to me too. It showed me those things. It showed me what happens if we make the wrong choice. The monolith's pulse quickened, echoing their rising voices like a drumbeat. Dust rained from the ceiling as the cavern's walls vibrated, cracks splitting wider, glowing veins of light spreading like roots. The planet wasn't just listening, it was reacting. Ilara clenched her fists, her voice rising. I don't care what it is. Don't want it. I didn't ask to be chosen by some alien machine. I just want out. I want to live. The light flared, so bright she staggered back, nearly blinded. In that searing brilliance, shapes appeared again, ghostly echoes of the ancient figures. This time there were only two. They stood facing each other across the core, their forms rippling, unstable, like the memory of a battle frozen in time. One raised its hand, glowing with a brilliance that reminded her of Riken's eyes. The other figure's form rippled with a softer, almost human outline, and for one breathless instant, Lara realized what she was seeing. The visions weren't of the past. They were of the choice now, standing between her and Raycon. The voice thundered again, shattering every thought in her head. One will bind, one will break. The seed cannot wait. Ilara's knees buckled. She clutched at the wall, her mind swimming. Images poured in faster, now planets igniting, fleets shattering. Cities rising from glassy seas, but not all of it was ruin. She saw green fields under strange suns, towers of light humming in harmony, voices laughing that were not human but not alien either. The choice didn't just mean destruction, it meant rebirth. But rebirth for who? Rykon was breathing hard, his body trembling with restraint. His blade slipped from his hand, clattering to the stone. He took one step closer to the light. "Stop," Lara shouted, her throat raw. She ran forward, grabbing his arm, pulling him back with all her strength. "You don't know what it will do to you. You don't know if you'll survive it." Gaze cut down to her, burning with a fire that was not entirely his own. "And if I don't, what happens then? This world tears itself apart. It doesn't just want us, it needs us. One of us. Maybe both. If we don't choose, it will decide for us." And you saw what that looks like. The cavern shook violently, throwing them both to their knees. The air split with a sound like thunder cracking inside the stone. The opening in the monolith widened, further, spilling out a torrent of light that rushed toward them like a wave. Ilara screamed, raising her arms instinctively as the wave hit. It didn't burn, it didn't crush. Instead, it filled. Every vein, every nerve, every thought was flooded. With raw power that wasn't hers, she cried out, her body jerking as visions burst again behind her eyes, Rakan standing alone in the light. His form melting into something larger, his body breaking but his will towering. Then herself in that same place, her heart splitting. With pain, her scream echoing through the void, but the world blooming green and alive beneath her feet. Two paths, both terrifying, both inevitable. The voice whispered, softer this time, curling into her mind like smoke. Choose, or be unmade. Her hands trembled as she clutched Ryken's arm tighter. He stared at her, sweat running down his face, his breath. Ragged for the first time since she'd met him, his confidence faltered. "Ilara," his voice cracked. "I can't. I don't know if I can hold it back much longer." She shook her head, fighting tears. "We're not gods. We're just two broken survivors on a dead world. We can't do this." The light roared louder, the cavern walls splitting, the ground buckling beneath them. The choice pressed harder, suffocating, endless. Ilara realized with horror that there was no way out. They couldn't escape. They had to answer. And in the rising storm of the planet's awakening, she realized the most terrifying truth of all. The world didn't care who survived. Only that one of them did. The cavern was collapsing. The roar of cracking stone drowned out thought, drowned out breath, drowned out everything but the thunder of the planet's rage. Light poured from the heart of the monolith like molten fire, flooding every shadow, burning every edge of darkness away. Dust and shards of rock rained from above, but the force holding them inside the chamber was stronger than gravity. They couldn't escape. Not anymore. Ilara clung to the trembling ground, her nails tearing against the stone, her body shuddering with the weight of the vision pressing into her mind. The planet's voice was no longer words. It was raw command, tearing through her. Veins splitting her skull in half with its demand, "Choose." Beside her, Rykon stood tall against the storm. His armor was cracked and scorched, his blade long forgotten at his feet, but his golden eyes burned like they were carved from the same light now flooding the chamber. His body shook, his jaw clenched, yet he did not bow. Looked like a figure, carved from will itself, locked in a battle no mortal could win. "Ilara," he shouted over the roar, his voice strained and desperate. "If you stay in this, it will kill you. You weren't meant for it." She staggered to her feet, gripping his arm, dragging herself closer to him. "And you were. Look at you, Raken. It's tearing you apart. Don't pretend you can carry this alone." His jaw tightened, his body trembling violently. It was already bleeding from his nose, his veins glowing faintly under his skin, like his body was becoming a vessel for something it was never built to contain. He winced, sucking in a sharp breath. This was always the end, my people knew. We thought we were sent to conquer this world, but we were chosen to die here, to keep the seed alive. Lara froze, her heart pounding. His words weren't just his. They came from the voice inside the chamber, from the history burned into his bloodline. He had known, maybe not in words, but deep in his soul, since they crashed. Her voice cracked. "No, You don't get to make that choice for both of us. If one of us has to stay, then it doesn't have to be you. His hand caught her wrist with sudden force, his grip trembling but unbreakable. His eyes blazed brighter than ever, the gold deepening, flickering like twin suns about to collapse. He leaned closer, his voice fierce and broken. I won't let it take you. Do you hear me? You've already survived the impossible, Alara. You're not meant to die here. You're meant to live, to carry this story, to carry them. If this world needs blood, it will have mine. She shook her head violently, tears stinging her eyes, her throat raw from screaming. And what am I supposed to do? Watch. Walk away while you burn for something I don't even understand. Don't ask me to survive like that, Raikon. Don't. You dare. The ground split open between them, a jagged line of molten light carving across the chamber floor. The monolith's heart was open now, fully revealed a core of pure, living brilliance, pulsing like the heartbeat of a god. Its pull was irresistible. It wanted them both, but it would only keep one. The voice thundered one final time, filling the chamber, shaking the air from their lungs. One will bind, one will break. Seed must root. The choice fell on them like a blade. Rakan looked at her one last time, and then before she could stop him, he shoved her back with all his strength.
Ow.
She stumbled, falling against the wall as the ground split, wider, separating them with a river of molten light. No, she screamed, reaching out, clawing at the glowing air between them. Rakan! But he was already stepping forward, into the blaze. For a heartbeat, his body convulsed, torn between flesh and light. His form twisted, cracked, dissolving into a shape too large, too impossible to describe. Scream echoed through the cavern. But it wasn't Penit's release. His voice merged with the roar of the planet itself. The chamber shook like it was breathing for the first time. Elara's tears streamed down her face as she watched him vanish into the brilliance. Form disintegrating into rivers of molten gold, the cavern walls steadied, the tremors slowed, and the air filled with a silence so absolute it rang in her ears. Then came the bloom. The core exploded outward not in destruction, but in creation. From the cracks in the stone, green tendrils burst forth, glowing vines wrapping around the cavern walls, spilling out into the broken planet beyond. The ground trembled, not with collapse but with growth. She could feel it in her bones. The lifeless world was stirring, breathing, reborn. But Raikon was gone. Ilara fell to her knees, her chest heaving, her voice breaking into sobs that echoed through the chamber. She clutched the stone where he had stood only moments before, her hand pressing into the warmth still lingering there. And then, in the silence, a whisper brushed across her mind, not the voice of the planet, but his. Live, Alara. That is your part. Live. Her tears blurred the glowing cavern into a haze. But she forced herself to stand, her body trembling, her heart shattered. Outside, the dead world was awakening. The choice had been made, and she was the only one left to carry it.